Hey, Emily, it's okay. Uh, Take care of your health first, all right? That's more important than anything. But thank you for showing up. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. Hey, Mrs. Miller, how you doing? Thank you for coming in. Hey, Din Din, how you doing? Thank you for coming in. How's your Monday going? I almost said Sunday because Mrs. Miller had a 4-day weekend, and my days are confused now. Oh, cool. I'll let a few more people come in, and then I'll start. Yeah, I did that. I did that yesterday. I just got to finish off doing sheets and whatever. Do that tomorrow during the week. Launch is my favorite. Not normally a launch day for me is probably Saturday, maybe Sunday. But now starting that football season is starting, it'll be done on Saturday. All right, I'm gonna start with it, and if people come in, I'll backtrack a little bit. All right, a lot of people been asking what's the difference with metal in general, the different genres from different countries. One of my favorite um, country for metal is Sweden. This type of metal, like the death metal, the black metal, the sort of grindy of it, it was fairly unknown until God, probably very late '80s, early '90s, probably like '89, '90 when it started to get come over here. Um, Around that time, all you could hear it was on independent radio, over the internet. Back then, it was AOL. Before, and then MySpace even. Robert Kaniski, how you doing, brother? Yeah, Robert. Early youth for concerts. Yeah, yeah. When when ticket prices weren't sky high, and the bands were actually doing it for the fans, not the money. Um, Leela, how you doing? Thank you for coming in. But Swedish metal, um, the only way you could really hear it was by magazines, fanzines. Back then, AOL or MySpace, or even when MTV, which never played it, there was a show called Headbangers Ball back in the day, and even on then, they would play heavy stuff, but not too much of the overseas stuff. I mean, every now and again you'll get a Napalm Death, um, a Creator, Slayer, Testament, things along that line. But to really get into that Swedish metal, you really had to know the music itself. A lot of it came off. I know for me personally, I first heard it through compilations. There was a new back in the day, Nuclear Blast Records put out a compilation, which I think they're still doing now, called Death is Just the Beginning. And it would showcase a lot of the the country bands from like Europe, from Sweden, Poland, Norway, Czech, Scandinavia, things like that. So the only ways you could really hear it was if you knew about the bands, and only certain record stores back then had, selections of it. One of my first bands that I ever heard out of Sweden blew my mind. Their band called Entombed. Their first record, Left Hand Path, is an absolute classic. Amazing vocals. L.G. Petrov passed away. He was one of my favorite lead singers of all time. Very heavy guitars. I call it like a razor blade type vocal. Sweden had a thing where a lot of the bands started to sound the same after a while because they all had that distinct sound to them. But it started to catch on over here. Their first album I heard, Left Hand Path, is an absolute gem. It's very heavy, grimy, dirty, amazing guitar work, drums, everything. Very melodic but heavy. Again, they also, in the mid 90s, they put out an album, Wolverine Blues, which is one of my favorite by them. They also, along with that, they put one out for Marvel when Wolverine Blues first came out. They put it out for Wolverine, the Marvel character. This is edited because it was for like radio and promotional. This is the original studio release of it. Their songs, basically the same songs that are on here are on the one they did for Marvel, but it's edited. There are certain parts of the songs that they cut out simply because I think they were trying to reach more of a younger fan base that was into Marvel and all the superhero things back then. But they broke up shortly after they did. They probably have about a good 10 albums out. There was a lot of infighting in the band at the time, and they went their separate ways. They came back a few years later under a different band name, Entombed AD. They put out 3 records. The lead singer, L.G. Petrov, one of my favorite death metal vocals of all time, passed away. He is missed big time. He had a unique vocal, great lead singer, great guy. He was in a couple of bands. Firespawn was one of them. Again, Swedish metal, it's one of my favorite types. They talk about a lot of stuff that's frowned upon. A lot of them is anti-religion, anti-Christian, pro-Christ, or pro-Satan, things like that. One of my favorite bands ever is a band called Candlemass. Epicus Doomicus Metallicus, excuse me. One of the premier Doom albums, of one of my favorite Doom metal albums ever. heavy guitars, great vocals. Um, just mind blowing. Robert Lowe was in them for a little bit from a band called South to Eternus. Also, Leaf, the lead singer of this band, just has a phenomenal voice. Period. The songs are perfect. Patrick, hey brother, how you doing? Thanks for coming in. Let me catch you on that chat for a minute. Let me go by you quick. They've been around for a very long time. This came out in 91, I believe. 90. Great doom album, heavy, melodic. Not the typical things that were coming out of Sweden at the time, but one of the staples from Sweden and death metal and doom metal. I still say they're one of the pioneers that started that whole doom metal and like a very gothic feel, melodic, great band, great album. It's been one of my top 10 for a very long time. Another one. A lot of the bands that came out, like I said, had a distinct sound. The vocals were about the same for almost everybody, and a lot of fans were into it. But hearing the other bands, it was almost like they were saying bands were trying to copy each other, and they weren't. It was just a sound that came out of Sweden at that time, and a lot to this day too. Another one of my favorite bands and albums of all time, Dismember. Very heavy, grindy, hard, fast, belligerent at times, to say the least. Well, actually, absolutely one of the forefathers of the whole Swedish death metal. This album is absolutely legendary. This came out in, probably 90, I think it was, 89, 90, 91. Legendary album. Absolutely. When I first heard these guys, I was blown away by them, as with a lot of other people. Hard, heavy, demeaning at times. I've seen these guys, I think, once or twice. Absolutely amazing. Like a lot of bands from over there, it took them a long time to come play over here in the U.S. because it wasn't catching on. But it was catching on with the underground. If you were in the middle, then away from the mainstream, away from all the poppy music that was out, the hard rock, the mainstream metal. These guys took people by storm. They're still one of my favorite bands of all time. They just put out a release of demos earlier this year. It came out. Still putting out quality albums. I mean, great albums. Another one is a band called Carnage. This is the reissue of this. This comes with 3 other demos that are absolutely legendary. They're hard to find. This came out in 2000. The original one of this came out in 90, I believe, or 91, something in that era. Mike Emmett from Carcass, arch enemy, was a big fan of these guys. He also played guitars on this album. Came out in 90. I'm sorry, 90. He played guitars on this album. I would have loved to see how far these guys have gone. It's one of the most sought after albums. Carnage, Dark Recollections. Like I said, a lot of people don't, a lot of people who aren't into metal don't really know the difference of things. The sounds, you have so much different subgenres. From Sweden, Poland, all the third world countries. And we run the death metal coming out of the U.S. is phenomenal. It's still coming. There's still bands coming out with albums. Older bands are still doing it to this day. I know a few of them that should retire, but it's still good to hear them putting out stuff. One of my favorite bands that I really first heard, a band called Grave from Sweden. One of my favorite. This is their Into the Grave, Tremendous Pain EP and demo. Tremendous Pain EP is very hard to find. It's a legendary EP by them. They have a vast collection to their entire discography. This is one band that has never changed their style. They might have gone a little bit more melodic over the past few years compared to what they were. I still love them. They're still absolutely one of my favorite bands. I got a box set by them. It has all their albums in it, demos, a couple of live things that they put out. I got that box set a few years ago. It has all the original recordings of all their first 10 albums, which actually this one is also in there too. Another band that is absolutely great. There's bands that people say are great, and then there's bands that people say about, but a lot of Swedish metal just blows everything away. Let me catch up in the chat. Patrick, it's just years of listening to it, being into it, and just reading a lot about it. There's books that are out about it. I have a ton of them over there. Even if you know things, you still want to read some things just to keep your mind fresh with the knowledge of it. You could ask me something that happened 2 days ago. I wouldn't remember. You could ask me something that happened with metal 30 years ago, and I'll remember it. It's just being into it for so long. Just the love of it, and it being a passion of mine for decades and years, and I know a lot of kids growing up were listening to different things, and especially kids that like back then in the 80s, kids, 90s, listen to the mainstream, the pop, the hip hop, the dance, whatever have you. I just stayed the course. I just, when I first heard it back when I was like 7 or 8, when I first heard the first Metallica, you could sink, just something you could sink your teeth into. The first Saxon, first Metallica, the EP, their demos, Overkill for that matter. It's just listening to things over the years, and staying with it. Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Miller. If you like this type of stuff, like to hear about bands, different types of metal, hit that button, subscribe, pass my channel around. I'm not trying to be famous on here, just doing something that I love to do. And that's, talking about it and just keeping my brain fresh with all the knowledge of it. Another band that's been around for actually decades. This came out in 92. Hypocrisy. Petronella. They have a vast collection, a very big discography for them. Many albums. I think they're like 15 albums in now, 14 albums in. Still a great band. They've changed their style just a little bit to where they're more melodic and more expanded a little bit, but still heavy. vocals are still have that grueling vocal, great guitar work. It's just typical Sweden. These come out of Sweden, the bands. Hey Cleo, how you doing? Thank you for coming in. Yeah, Mrs. Metalhead calls me a walking encyclopedia of music and metal. I mean, she could tell you I've been into this, God, since now. Let's see, I'm 49, so you figure 40 years now, at least 40 years. And I seen bands come, I seen bands go, I seen bands break up, get back together. One band I wish would just stay retired and stop embarrassing themselves is Motley Crue. Again, I said it before, they need to just go away. Not go away. I love Motley Crue. Don't get me wrong. I love Motley Crue. Their EP's coming out October 4th. It's called Canceled. A friend of mine saw them the other night in Connecticut at Mohegan Sun Arena, which I think they did a bad double booking for that show. They had Crue playing in one part, and then if anybody's been to that casino, to the arena there, they have a place called the Wolf's Den. Well, they had Queensryche playing at that. People were leaving Crue to go see Queensryche. They said it was a walking, excuse my language, shit show. They said it was just like a carnival. I say, John 5, go back to White Zombie, please. Leave Crue, go back to White Zombie. You had that taste of, the big bands. Go back to White Zombie. Go back to either Manson or Murder Dolls. Just leave. I know Mick Mars is laughing at them right now. They anyway, Mick Mars is still getting paid because Motley Crue basically owns the rights on all their music. And they're slowly releasing them again. But Mick Mars, as I said before, Mick Mars is hurting. He's got a bad bone disease. So, yeah, but that's one band I wish would just stay retired, collect their royalties or whatever. Their new single, off the Canceled album, Dogs of War or something like that. I listen to that one. It's okay. Their cover of Beastie Boys, Fight for Your Right, is absolutely atrocious. I don't like it one bit. That's one band I wish would just stay retired. Let the bands that are still going good do it. But Vince Neil and Nikki Sixx want the money. That's basically what it is now for them. I think it's even Tommy Lee for that matter. It's just, if you did your thing for 30 some odd years like they did, put out legendary songs, great albums, sold out arenas, venues nightly, and you say you're retired, and then 5 years after or 10 years after you say you're retiring, you come back out. And like I said, when they first retired, I said 5 years for them. Well, it went 10 years. I wouldn't go see them now. I've seen them a few times in the past. Actually, I see them. Yeah, I'll say about five, 6 times I saw them. I wouldn't see them now. No. And no's being nice. Let me get back to what I was talking about. One of my ultra favorite bands that I stumbled upon, band called Blaze My Sorrow. This album is Anger, Hate, and Fury. It's an absolute gem of a Swedish band and album. They talk about everything from basic things about life, atmospheric, very melodic. Um, they just came out with an EP start of this year. It's somewhere behind me over here or over there. Um, very very melodic, heavy at times. Great breakdowns and everything. This is one band I have actually loved since day one. I had to go back like one or two albums when I first heard them. This came out in God, I want to say 99, I believe. 98. Something in that range. But they're still going. They're one of those Swedish bands that have been under the radar, but people still love them. This is like one of my favorite favorite albums of all time. Eventually, I do intend on doing like a top 100 of my personal favorite albums. I'm working on that. It's not easy. People think it's easy to grab an album and just put it in a top. It's not easy. Doing that is a lot of albums, that I have in my head for years. There's so many different genres, of different albums, of different bands and types. So it's not that easy to do a top 100. Top 20, yeah. Top 30, top 50, yeah. But top 100 albums, it's easier doing the top 100 bands than it is to do top 100 albums. It really, really is. Hold on. Yes, Leela. Viking metal is a form that comes out of Sweden also. Dark Funeral. Well, Dark Funeral is more of a satanic, anti-religion type band. They just came out with a new one, and they're coming out with a new one at the end of this year. Amon Amarth is the same way. Children of Bodom, who I absolutely love. Lexi passed away a couple years ago from Children of Bodom. One of my favorite ones. They just came out. The remaining members of Children of Bodom came out with Bodom After Midnight. Great band, great album. It's not the same without Lexi. One of the nicest guys in the business. Real nice guys. Yeah, but yeah, Viking metal comes out of different countries. You have it coming out of Scandinavia a lot, Czech, Sweden, Poland. There's some that comes out of the U.S., but mainly out of Europe. And I love Viking metal, especially Amon Amarth. Like one of my favorite bands of all time. I took Mrs. Metalhead to see them a couple years ago, and she could tell you the crowd is into it. They get the crowd involved from the start to the finish of that show. It's an amazing show. Hold on, let me catch up. Patrick, I don't I don't mind Rob Zombie. I love early White Zombie. Make Them Die Slowly. Supercharger, their early stuff. I didn't mind there's the album after La Sexorcisto. I have the name of it top of my head right now. And I'm looking right at it, I think too. I don't mind Rob Zombie. I heard he could be an asshole. Excuse my language. Perfect example. Okay, you're in one of the biggest bands ever in White Zombie. And also your solo, Rob Zombie. He bought a place in Southbury, Connecticut, out, away from people. He was living off the grid. They built a skate park down from him. Okay? He goes to the town board and says he doesn't like it. It's too loud. I heard this. I started laughing. I'm like, you are in the bands. Multiple. You played in front of millions of fans. You're going to complain about a skate park? I think it's petty. I think he's trying to make himself, in charge. Because he's a frontman in White Zombie. I don't get it. When I heard that, like I said, it made my head spin when he said that. He's off the grid. I mean, his place is like a compound. But for him to complain about a skate park for kids that are probably into his music, that have probably supported him over the past 20 some odd years, 30 some odd years now, is mind blowing to me. I saw White Zombie open up for Slayer before they were even known. It was in between their very first album, because everybody thinks Thunder Kiss 65 and Los Exorcisto is their first album. It's not. One of their first albums is called Let Them Die Slowly, or I'm sorry, Make Them Die Slowly. That's their first album. They do have a couple before that are very more punk feeling, a lot grungier, a lot heavier. Those are hard to find. They did come out with a box set called like the first, something about, I forgot exactly what it's called. I can't remember the name of it right now. But a lot of people don't realize White Zombie started right here in New York. Right here in New York. White Zombie is from New York originally, before they took off. Yeah, but for him to say that, I mean, he's a musician. He's known. I think he's doing it because they've fallen off over the past 10 years or so. Still amazing live. I've seen them many times live, and they're amazing live. One of the best live shows I've ever seen was White Zombie. I saw them, like I was saying, open for Slayer. I think like 1990, I think it was 89, 90. They were nobodies. Nobody knew of them, and they blew me away then. And I mean, they played for I think 25, maybe 30 minutes, and they blew me away. And Sean the bassist, Uslet or something. I can't pronounce her last name. Amazing bassist. She was doing her own thing. I haven't heard anything about them coming out any new. I know they've been putting out some live stuff. As for him, his solo, I think he put the last one was a couple of years ago, I believe it was. I got him over there somewhere. But yeah, I don't mind Rob Zombie at all. It's just his attitude, gets in the way a lot. I mean, like I said, White Zombie made him big. White Zombie made him big. And that's all the airplay that he got on MTV, all the times that he was on Headbangers Ball. He painted the set for Headbangers Ball back in the day. All his drawings that you see, all the pictures that you see on the Rob Zombie album covers, the inserts, like all the artwork, that's all Rob Zombie's artwork. He goes to that place. He has that warped mind. He puts all that out there. Like I said, great band live. I've seen them a few times and blew me away a few times. Keeps the crowd going. Excuse me. But as for him personally, like a lot of these, bands that get big, their egos get swollen, their head gets swollen, and they think everything has to revolve around them, and they forget who made them big. Us, the fans, spending the money on the merch, going out buying their albums, going out buying their shirts, things like that. A lot of bands seem to forget that. It's sad, but very true. Oh no, Patrick, you're good. Patrick, you're good. Yeah, Patrick. I could put the CDs, here that I have. I'll get to those. But saying what you were saying, Patrick, about the list, uh, it's there's so many albums by so many bands. Um, I can tell you, I can tell you, probably top 10 that I would put on my top 100. My favorite album of all time, my favorite thrash album, the pinnacle of thrash, Slayer's Rain and Blood. That album set the bar back in '86. Um, that that album, incidentally, um, that album almost did not get released. They were on Atlantic, I believe, at the time, or EMI, one of those labels, or was it, or even Capitol. They didn't want to sign them, because that album is so controversial, especially the first song, "Angel of Death." "Angel of Death" is about a author who wrote about Auschwitz in Germany, the concentration camps. Um, Capitol didn't want to sign them. Didn't want to sign that album. Rick Rubin, the guy who I call a metal genius, who ran Def Jam at the time, which is now Def America. You had on Def Jam, you had Public Enemy, Beastie Boys, Slayer, Metallica was even on there for a little bit, I believe. Anthrax, I think, and a ton of others. Tone Loc, guys like that. Rick Rubin told him, "I'll sign you. I'll put the album out." That album to this day, it's the top selling, top metal thrash album of all time. That album came in just under 30 minutes. It set the bar for what thrash metal and metal was to be in '86. 1986, you had a slew, and I mean iconic albums that came out in '86. You had Slayer that came out with an album. You had Creator that came out. Testament, Anthrax was bouncing back and forth. Saxon released something back then. Megadeth. You had so many albums that came out in '86, and that album still stands the test of time to any album, any band. Not too many bands could put out. A lot of bands peak with their first album. A lot of bands, their first album, it's their best album. Rain and Blood was Slayer's third album. My opinion, Hell Awaits was a phenomenal album by them, the second album, and then Haunting the Chapel, and Our Show No Mercy for that matter. I remember hearing the first time I ever heard Rain and Blood. Now, I heard Slayer before. My first time I ever heard Slayer was Chemical Warfare, or Dissident Aggressor off their Show No Mercy EP and the Live Undead EP, which they did Live Undead in its entirety in New York back in the day, in '85, I think it was, or '84. I lost the train of thought. Oh, I'm sorry. Rain and Blood set the bar. If anybody knows that album, you can look it up on iTunes. On here, Slayer, Rain and Blood. It's the top selling. It's the pinnacle of what thrash metal should have been then. Um, there was a band out of San Antonio who are still around called Slayer. They had to change their name to SA Slayer, not because they didn't want to get them confused with the icons, the legends from California, which is now the beast known as Slayer. But they had to change their name. They were told to change their name by a couple of record labels. But they're putting out things down there in Texas still. I've heard them. I think I might have them on like a comp or something. They're not bad, but they're not, Slayer, to say the least. But yeah, Patrick, if I would do that top 100, that would take me some time. And I mean, I would have to come to my room and stay in my room for a couple of days and just go through, play things I haven't listened to in a while. Like I could, from mid-80s till 90s, I could pop off albums and I could put in my top 10, top 20. Whether it's thrash, hardcore, crossover, death metal, grindcore, because grindcore was fairly new in the 80s too. Grindcore has been around since like 85, 86. A band called Napalm Death from Europe. From England, actually, was like one of the first grindcore bands. We used to call it, when I first heard it, I called it guerrilla music, because it was so, the vocals was like grindy. I mean, you couldn't hear what they were saying. It was that bad. It was that much of a vocal. And Barney from Napalm Death was one of my favorite bands, death metal bands ever. I see Napalm Death 4, 5, 6 times. We saw them down in San Antonio on Slayer's last tour. The amount of people that were there that never heard of them compared to people that were there that heard of them was astonishing. And I'm yelling at people. These guys have been around since 86. You guys never heard of them? I'm like, come on. And great band. Another band from England that has put out insane albums. Top to bottom. Let me catch up on the chat. Yeah, Patrick. First time I heard them was from my brother, and I was hooked on them. When I first heard Chemical Warfare, Dissident Aggressor, Die by the Sword, Cryonics. Oh God! And then hearing Hell Awaits. I remember when Hell Awaits came out, the opening to Hell Awaits, the song. I was like 10, I think, or 11 when the album dropped. That album, the start of it with the demon talking in the distorted voice, it scared the bejesus out of me. It scared the shit out of me. But it kept me listening. Another Slayer album that is severely underrated, Hell Awaits, top to bottom. That album is just mind blowing. That was when Slayer was considered satanic, right, about Satan and all this and all that. When Slayer was, that's what Slayer wrote about, especially Hell Awaits, Rain and Blood, and then they got a little bit mellower, melodic almost on South of Heaven, which a lot of people didn't like that album. I think it's a great album. People said, oh, they're selling out because they slowed down. How can you top Rain and Blood? You can't. And David said, if we were to write a Rain and Blood 2, it'll be just like them saying, okay, we're giving up, and we have nothing else to write. Slayer's one of those bands. Do I miss them playing? Yes. Do I see them getting back together anytime soon? No. There's too much animosity right now between Tom Araya and Kerry King, because Kerry King's band that just came out with his solo album, which they're having issues in that band now. Which, when you do a band like that, when you pull musicians from other bands to come join your band, it's going to cause issues, and they're having infights now in that band. So there's no telling if that is just going to be a one-off for them, you know. But do I miss them? Yeah, I've seen Slayer a number of times, and that last show they did, I almost cried. Ask Mrs. Middleton, I almost cried seeing them walk off that stage for the last time. You know, growing up listening to them, being into them for 38 years that they were around. You know, that's one band I do wish come back in a full-blown tour, new album. Will it happen? I don't know. Like I said, a lot of animosity between Tom Araya and Kerry King. Gary Holt is full-time now with Exodus. When he took over for the late, great Jeff Hanneman, who passed away, we thought they were going to break up. I said, why? Gary Holt filled in for him. Gary Holt and him are best friends. And if anybody could play Slayer's music, if anybody could play Jeff Hanneman's songs, it's Gary Holt. And he took it out on it, and I love Gary Holt from Exodus. One of the best guitarists. Hey, Kelly, how are you? How are you doing, honey? How's Gabby doing? Everybody, this is a friend of mine. She helped me out a lot. Back in 2017. I'm not gonna get too much in it. She knows. And I think I mentioned it in the past stream. Kelly's great. Kelly, I love you to death. You know that. And when I said Mrs. Middlehead knows what I mean. Kelly helped me out dramatically. A lot. I'm gonna leave it at that. But thank you for coming in. That's awesome. Yeah, I so she started school. That's so awesome. I remember when you had her. Oh my God, Jesus. Yeah, but Kelly can tell you the same thing. She knew me back a few years back. Being in the middle is my passion. And the music got me through a lot that I was going through back in 2017. Got me through a lot. 16 and 17 for that matter. Yeah, she was tiny. Yep. Yeah, especially then. Yeah, but Patrick, getting back to the list, Patrick, that'd be hard, and I mean hard to do. I mean, I'm sure you and Robert know what I'm talking about. Yeah, when you're into something, as long as I've been into it, there's so many different albums that stand out. I can do a top 10. I can do a top 20, top 50. When it hits 100, it's like, the early Sepulturas, Morbid Visions, Chaos AD, Arise, things like that. Early, like the very first Maidens, which Maiden's Power Slave turns 40 this year. I heard that. I was like, huh? They've been playing it on XM. That album turns 40. I'm like, I was 8 years old when it came out. I was like, wow, yeah, that blew me away. That took me back. The first Machine Head album, Burn My Eyes, which is an absolute amazing groove thrash album that came out in '94. For those who don't know, Rob from Machine Head, who was also in a band called Violence, back in the day from California, he's in Machine Head now. Violence just came out with a 6-song EP. They're coming out with a comeback album. It's supposed to be 2025. I'm hoping. Violence was another band from back in the 80s and 90s for thrash metal. Great band. Awesome band. A lot of people didn't like him because the vocalist, his singing was like almost like nails on a chalkboard type. Great band though. Great albums. Oppressing the Masses. Oh my God. Their EP that was hard to find with Officer Nice on it and Gutter Slut. It was called Torture Tactics, the EP. That caught a lot of slack back in the 90s when it came out. I just refound that too, the master of it. Somebody was trying to sell for $100. I said, "You're not going to get $100 for it." I said, "I'll give you 40 for it." And I said, even then, I'm pushing it for that. And I ended up getting it for like 35. Being a collector, things that are worth, especially the time frame that they came out. But yeah. Well, something fell. What the fuck? I don't know what that was, but something fell. I don't know. Yeah, it's been a weird day. Yeah, Patrick, 25 albums is easy to do. 25 albums, that's nothing. That's like just throwing something in a bucket. Doing 100 albums, that's nuts. There's no way. I mean, I've seen musicians do it for like magazines and like MTV specials. I mean, I can do it, but it'll take me some time. I mean, that'll be like a 5-part stream where I'll start from 100 and work my way down to 1. Even the top album, like the top number 1 album for me, would be hard. I mean, oof. There'll be a couple of Slayer albums in there, Anthrax albums, Priest definitely, Maiden definitely, Sabbath definitely, Motorhead without a doubt. Excuse me. Method of Destruction's MOD out of New York. Another band, Billy Milano from MOD. Their last album came out in 2017, I believe. Not a bad album. That's another band, from the 80s that back in the 80s, musicians, I've seen metal, didn't care what they said. They put it out there, and that's how it should be. SOD, Stormtroopers of Death, another band fronted by Billy Milano. SOD was only supposed to be a one-off back then. When they put out the iconic Cutthroat, Smack You in the Face, Speak English or Die album, that was just supposed to be a one-off. That was Billy Milano on vocals, Danny Liker from Nuclear Assault, Brutal Truth on bass, Scott Ian on guitar, Charlie Benanti of Anthrax also on drums. That's another album that stands the test of time, a masterpiece, because it hit on so many things that people didn't want to talk about, especially back in the 80s, with all that things that were going on back in the 80s, whether it's wars, racism, drugs, killings, things like that. That, bands back then didn't shy away from it. They put it out there, and that's what caught a lot of people's, attention about being too politically correct. You talk about things like that, and today people want to shy away from it. They get offended by it. That's why I'm glad I grew up in that generation where, we had backbones back then. We didn't care, what was said. We said what was on our minds. It went. Nowadays, you say something to somebody, they get, so offended and crying and say, stop, Prozac. Sorry, but that's how I feel about it. Yeah, SOD. They just re-released that album. Speaking of which, today on the 30th anniversary. I think it was the 30th anniversary of it. It's a silver edition now, and it comes with like extra tracks on it. I got the original of it, and I also have the reissue of it. The reissue comes with a ton of outtakes, ton of demos, one-offs, things like that. Cleo, there were so many amazing albums from the 80s and 90s, even like the early 2000s. Albums back then had heart, had feeling. There's still bands doing it today that are putting out great albums. I remember I laughed at somebody that said thrash metal is dead. Give it a rest. I said, excuse me? I said, there's bands out there. There's bands out there that are waving that metal flag. You have new bands that come out over the past, I say, 20 years. Bands like Toxic Holocaust, Warbringer, Municipal Waste, Harm's Way, who's an absolute great thrash band. Enforcer. God, there's so many bands going through my head right now. But there's Mastodon, who I absolutely love. You got Hammerfall that are still putting out excellent albums. Halloween still putting out albums. Then you have, ones that were not known, like the band called Nailbomb, who their debut album called Point Blank. They only put out that album in a live album that was called, I have it over there somewhere, Proud to Commit Commercial Suicide. For those who don't know, Nailbomb was a combination of Sepultura and a band called Fudge Tuttle. Alex Newport and Max Cavalera got together, and that was when they joined forces. You had Sepultura, who at that time was death metal, like a death groove metal, melodic, because Sepultura changed a lot from what they were, from Schizophrenia, which is my favorite album by them, from Beneath the Remains, Schizophrenia, to Arise, and then to Chaos AD. They changed a lot. The Cavalera brothers finally squashed their issues. Max Cavalera and his brother Igor are re-releasing the old catalog of Sepultura under their name, Cavalera Brothers, or Cavalera Conspiracy. They just released Morbid Visions and Bestial Invasion on from Sepultura. I love what they did. I like to see. Will there ever be a Sepultura reunion? No. There's too much animosity going on with other former members of Sepultura. Um, they're the new lead singer from Sepultura. I didn't like at first, but they did put out a couple of quality albums with him. Al, I think his name was, I forgot his first name, but Sepultura's another band I absolutely love. First time I heard them, I was blown away from them. First time I heard Sepultura was Schizophrenia. I had to go back for Beneath the Remains, and Troops of Doom off that album is insane. There's bands up that are putting out albums and re-releasing their own stuff, which is great. I think. Another band from here. You guys might remember the band Faith No More with Mike Patton. They're the ones that caught some slack for that video Epic that had the fish dancing around in that video. They caught a lot of crap from PETA or PETA, whatever that organization is. Mike Patton did a band called Mr. Bungle, Bungle. That was his alter ego, that band. They just put out a couple of years ago, they put out a thrash album that was recorded back in '86. That album did not get released till now. If this album was released back in '86, it would have been probably one of the top albums of '86. Mike Patton's another one. He was in Faith No More, which was, they were metal, but it was like a jump around, like a crossover, almost like a rap type. I say Faith No More was early nu metal, but I love Faith No More. I saw them a couple times. Mike Patton is an absolute maniac on stage, to say the least. Yeah, Cleo, Police and U2, that's more, in my opinion, alternative from the 80s. Don't get me wrong, Police put out some great albums back then, as did U2. Not for me, though. They did a Sting. I think Sting was one of the best frontmen, hands down, back then. Those bands too, the back then the fame got to them, having 3 or 4 main hits. Back then it was good. Back then it was the mainstream alternative top 40 radio play, and a lot of them back then, it was different, from music back then. Metal was always hanging around, the underground, and once 86 hit and 88, 89, and then when the 90s it just took off. Now there's so many bands that are still coming around, pumping out great stuff. There's a lot of bands coming out of New York. A lot of bands coming out of New York. A lot of death metal bands, especially coming out of Brooklyn area. Gravesend, In Vain. One of the greatest hardcore bands ever from the city, from Queens. Marauder. They're still around. They're putting out new stuff. Sick of It All. My favorite hardcore band from Queens. Louis. There's a GoFundMe page going around for Louis. He was diagnosed with cancer. So they put up a GoFundMe page to help with medical bills. I've donated to it. That's one of the metalheads. We take care of our own. you know, because we don't ask for anything. You know, we always try to do it ourselves. But with somebody like that, you know, that's something that I do support and always will, especially being local. Hell, there, um, Scorpions just put out a new album. They're still going. Saxon just put out a new album too, and not too many knew Saxon back in the day, and they just I got it up there. The 40th anniversary of The Eagle Has Landed. I got that up there. The collector's box set that comes with the full album, live, and everything else. They're still going. Hell, Priest. I still say the new Priest album is probably album of the year. More than likely album of the year. And there's still albums coming out over the next 3 months. Some great albums coming out. Anthrax is coming out with a new album. I'm hoping start of 2025. I hope. There's so many great, bands, especially thrash bands from the 80s that are still waving that flag. I mean, they're not touring as much, but Overkill's still out there touring. And they just came out with a new album. Overkill's coming out. The last Overkill came out in 2022, I think it was. 2023. They're coming out with a new album. They're saying 2025. So, metal's always been like that, to say the least. They just keep trucking along. Yeah. Patrick, yeah. Yeah, the famous drinking games. One of my favorite bands out of Sweden, still around, Bathory. Doomy, heavy, death metal. One of the greatest albums ever made, hands down. This one came out on Black Mark Records. This came out in, God, I want to say like 82, 83, something along that line. These guys have been pumping out stuff too. I don't get away from the Sweden. That's from doing the Swedish. But that's fine. Like I said, I like the conversations about it. Like Robert said about, and Patrick said about me knowing the knowledge. It's just talking about it and just, refreshing my mind, keeping my mind fresh with everything. Slayer, and yes, my favorites. Metallica. Okay, I was a big Metallica fan, and I'm sort of still am. I don't get me wrong on that. One of the first times I saw Metallica, one of the first, it was when the Justice album came out, which I think "And Justice for All" by far next to Master of Puppets is their best album, hands down. I know everybody's gonna say "Ride the Lightning" and "Kill 'Em All." "Ride the Lightning" and "Kill 'Em All" started, the started to get thrash metal known. "Kill 'Em All" is legendary, as is "Ride the Lightning," which I love. "Ride the Lightning" and "Kill 'Em All" does not have a bad track on it, top to bottom. Master of Puppets is a great album. It it showed them. It showed Metallica expanding themselves when that album dropped. Um, yes, they lost Cliff Burton, which, in my opinion, is the greatest bassist, hands down. Um, he wasn't called the Machine for nothing. I was lucky, fortunate to see him one time live. Um, he was what we call now the Whip. If you had long hair, you know what I mean. When you headbang, you're basically going like this. I can't do it now because my neck and my shoulder. But he would just do the windmill with his head, and that's all you would see of him on stage. I miss Cliff Burton. If I think if Cliff Burton was still alive, they might, more than likely, they would not have made videos. If they made videos, it would not be for ballads, and they would not be doing ballads on any of their albums. I don't remember one of the first times I saw them, getting back to that, for the Justice album, I saw them at a place called Lake Compounds in Connecticut. A band called The Cult. Yes, The Cult opened for them. The Cult is a great band. For those you don't know, the frontman for Cult also does The Doors 2.0 with Krieger. Getting back to them, when Metallica did the video for One off Justice album, which again, I love that album, and I love the video that they did for One. For those who don't know, that song One is based off a novel called Johnny Got His Gun. They took facts from that book and put it into that song. I started noticing Metallica starting to go more of a mainstream feel with them. I got the Black Album. I stood in that line when they had the midnight release. I got that album. When Enter Sandman world premiered on MTV, when they said Enter Sandman's coming out, and that song popped, I sat back and said, okay, metal now has an iconic song that is going to be known for years. Do I mind that album? No. I didn't like the fact they put 2 ballads on that album. Nothing else matters. I just, that's one thing I wish they never did. And the song Unforgiven, or what it was called, mind you, they did Unforgiven 1, Unforgiven 2, Unforgiven 3 as add-ons to their following albums. When they did those 2 ballads, I was like, why? You know, and they were saying, we don't care what people think. You know, that's when I said they're being controlled by the record company. You know, record companies want you to sell the ballads. Granted, I'm not taking nothing away from Metallica for doing the ballads, okay? I'm not. Back in the 90s, a lot of these record companies wanted the bands to push ballads. The one band that I could say has the greatest power ballads ever is Testament. Testament did a song called The Ballad off Practice What You Preach. Great album, iconic thrash album. That will be in my top 5. Testament, because back then people wanted to hear the ballads. But metal bands, when they do ballads, it's called power ballads. And it showcases what they could really do. You know, the vocals and everything. So I didn't mind it too much, you know. But when you hear Nothing Else Matters being played at a club, a dance club, when you hear Nothing Else Matters, the backup music, the backdrop music on KC 101 out of here in New York, in the city, when you hear that being played in the background, are you cared? I was mind blown. They're playing Metallica on KC 101, which anybody, Patrick, if you know, I'm talking about from the city, Kelly, I'm sure you know, and Mrs. Metalhead, KC 101 back in the day was pop. It was mainly a pop station, dance station, like Hot 97. And what was that other one? 98.7 Kiss, whatever it was. But when you hear Metallica, that song, it's like, why? What are they doing playing Metallica on a mainstream station like this? Then you're hearing Nothing Else Matters being played at proms, cotillions. It's like people that wouldn't associate those songs with Metallica thought, okay, that's Metallica. Ooh, they changed. Then you had people jumping on that bandwagon. That's why I said from the Black Album on, they had more bandwagon jumpers that jumped on the bandwagon of Metallica. I can't tell you how many times I had to tell people, you do realize the Black Album was not their first album, right? You do realize that. Huh? Yeah, they've had 4 albums prior. What are you guys talking about? You know, like I said, Metallica set that bar early, 82, 83. Jesus, I think I showed this a couple times. That's the original Metallica, No Life to Leather demo. I got it on tape and I got it on CD over there. That's the original. I first heard this when they first came out. Well, this is the original dubbed. Let me make that clear. They did reissue this on Record Store Day on tape. When I first heard this, back in the day, hearing Hit the Lights, Motor Breath, they even changed a song called Mechanics. That's on here. Mechanics was not written by Metallica. Mechanics was written by Dave Mustaine and McCovney, the original guitarist in Metallica, Ron McCovney. I'm glad. I'm going to go clear what you're saying about the bands. I'm glad Dave Mustaine got kicked out of Metallica when he did. Believe it or not, I'm glad he got kicked out. Because Megadeth has always been trying to outdo Metallica since Dave Mustaine left. Dave Mustaine could be an asshole. I'm not going to deny that. But Dave Mustaine is real. Dave Mustaine is true. You listen to any Metallica album, even when the Black Album, James Hetfield has always had to have his guitar way up here. He would drown out everybody. He drowned out Kirk Hammett, who I think is an incredible guitarist. Then he would drown out the bass. When Jason Newsted was in Metallica, now Jason Newsted, for those who don't know, came over from a band called Flotsam and Jetsam after the death of Cliff Burton. He would drown out the bass. Drown Newsted out. Newsted is an insane bassist. Insane bassist. It's a shame he can't play no more because of his neck, and he's got nerve damage bad. But I'm glad Dave Mustaine left or formed Metallica or formed Megadeth. I'm sorry. That first Megadeth album, Killing Is My Business, which I have the original of Over There Somewhere, is a great album. I'm glad they put that out when they did. I think Dave saw them starting to go more mainstream when he was in Metallica. Even though that was early on. Dave Mustaine always said he was trying to outdo Metallica. There was a beef between them that lasted a number of years, probably up to like 2010, when Dave Mustaine finally sat down with Lars Ulrich and what's it called? Oh my God, my mind just went blank. Hetfield from Metallica, James, to sort everything out. He held a grudge for a long time. And I'm telling you, I personally, when Metallica came out with Load and Reload, I didn't buy the albums. A friend of mine had them. I listened to them. I didn't buy them. I still don't have them in my collection. I don't have those albums. I won't buy them. I don't. There's only like 3 or 4 songs, in my opinion, off of Load, and maybe 3 songs off of Reload that I could tolerate. I won't buy them. I don't like those albums by them, and I made it known I don't like them. I do have the new album, 28 Seasons. It's a good album. I think lyrically they could have done better. I think the lyrics were rushed. The music's good. Hetfield's vocals are for me. Good album. He actually let other people be heard on this record. Whereas in the past he would always have to be on top, overshadowing everybody. And that's one thing I didn't like about him. But I still like Metallica. I really do. It's just when they did that collaboration with that EP Lulu or what it was called. Oh boy. I heard that. I was like, what are they doing? That's one EP by them I will not get. I heard that one time. I was like, are you serious? What are they doing? Oh yeah, Patrick, their early stuff was iconic. It brought thrash metal up to the forefront. It brought bands like Anthrax up with them. And Anthrax has been, in my opinion, has been putting out great stuff for years. Slayer is Slayer. Slayer's been my favorite thrash band forever. Period. Exodus, I think Cleo said it. Exodus is great. They just came out with a live album that was recorded back in '89. They just put it out on CD now. Great recording. Metal Church just came out with a live album called The Last Sermon. Anybody knows that Metal Church? Mike Howe was the lead singer. Mike Howe had demons. He couldn't see anywhere. He couldn't get help. He took his own life. Me and Mrs. Metalhead were fortunate to see one of his last shows. I love Metal Church. Great band. They just put out the final concert that Mike Howe ever did. I just got it a couple weeks ago. I've been listening to it. It's over there somewhere. But yeah. Patrick, he had to go. But I think by him going, it lit a fire underneath him. To be honest with you, Megadeth has only put out one bad album in their entire discography. One bad album. And that bad album, the album called Risk. They took chances on that album, and they even said it too. It's one of their worst albums. I mean, I got it over there. It's the worst albums. The worst, hands down. But Metallica doing Lulu, that took the cake as the worst thing they ever could do. Excuse me. Megadeth has always been one of my favorites. Their current album, the Dying, it's called, outdoes Metallica's new album by a long shot. Their last album compared to Metallica's last one, their latest albums back to back, the new Megadeth absolutely blows Metallica away in every aspect, vocally, musically, everything. Megadeth, I think Megadeth peaked with Rust in Peace, which is their masterpiece, in my opinion. It's their greatest album they ever did. A lot of people would say, oh, the albums that they did in the 90s are up there. The ones that came out in the 90s for them were great albums. It touched on a lot of things. Dave Mustaine is, Dave doesn't hide it. He's very political. He puts everything out there that's going on. He doesn't hide it. He doesn't stray from it. Some of you might remember back in the 90s, they had a thing called Rock the Vote. It was for our generation to get out there and vote. You know, Dave Mustaine was out there on the MTV tour. Pepper from COC, another great band. Corrosion of Conformity. Why? That's the one thing that I love. They don't stray away from nothing. They wear their heart on their sleeve. Dave puts it out there. One of their best albums, in my opinion, is End Time. Great album, melodic. It's heavy. It's Megadeth. When Countdown to Extinction came out in 92, I saw them starting to get more mainstream for them, getting away from, Rust in Peace, Peace Sells Who's Buying, things like that. Starting to get more into that melodic Megadeth. A lot of people didn't like it. I didn't mind it. I actually loved the albums that they did in the 90s. Like I said, the one bad album they did was Risk. It's a bad album. Even early 2000s for them. Great albums. Back then, it touched a lot on what was going on. What album was it? United Abominations, I think it is. Yeah. That album came out after 9/11 happened. And that touched on a lot of things that happened, around that time. And Dave put it all out there. Incidentally, Patrick, Slayer, you may not remember this. Their album, God Hates Us All, which I think is a great album by them. Pissed off a lot of people just by the title of it. That album, God Hates Us All, came out on 9/11. Every song on that album has something to do about 9/11. It struck me when I got that album. It struck me as, wow, It's like they knew. It's like they were writing about things that happened as it happened, which freaked me out. But yeah, a lot of people despise that album by Slayer just because of the title. You know, I always say God doesn't hate us; He judges us. But God doesn't hate us. It makes for one hell of a song title, one hell of a great song title, one hell of a great conversation piece, top to bottom. But get back to Metallica and Megadeth. I'm glad he left. Like Patrick said, Megadeth just re-released their entire first 6 album catalog. It comes with the full album, then it comes with live tracks of it, demos of it, live like one-offs. You know, I got them also because I wanted to have the extra tracks on them. But they just really re-released everything. I would not get the re-release of "Killing Is My Business." They censor out a lot of songs. They literally censor out stuff on that album, on the reissue. I got it. I don't listen to it. I don't like the hearing beep and the change in the words. That first Megadeth album, they did "These Boots" by Patsy Cline. Well, Dave had to change it. They didn't want Dave to write his version of that song because he was going to add some words to it that weren't in Patsy Cline's song. If you have that edition of that first Megadeth, hold on to it. That album with the original "These Boots" on there, I seen it go for about $250 easily, simply because people want that song. That album did come out again after that whole fiasco where Dave re-recorded that entire album in 85, 86, or 84, I'm sorry, 84. And that song wasn't on there. So there's versions. There's the original version. Then there's the version with "These Boots" not on it. Then there's a version of them, the new reissue of it with "These Boots," but it's very censored. And I don't like censored stuff. I don't like albums that are censored. I can't stand it. Thanks, Cleo. I appreciate it. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for, all the support and everything from the very beginning. Mrs. Metalhead pushing me to do it. Getting advice from Ange, Dutch, for that matter, and a couple other people I follow. I don't do this just, like I said, I don't do it to get big. Doing this takes me back to high school years where I used to DJ parties all the time. And there was radio stations back in the day, 88.5 WVOF in Fairfield University, and also 80.7 WNHU in Connecticut at University of New Haven. I would DJ at VOF. So doing this, it brings me back to that. It's basically the same thing. It's just now there's a chat in front of me, where back then it was just broadcasting. The feedback has been great. I've had to put I've had to put one person in their place. I'm not gonna say who. It happened my very first stream, and I try not to let things get to me, but it did. And I basically told this person, until you have done this, don't critique me for something that I've done for years and know how to do. So yeah, it's something I love doing. Mrs. Metalhead can tell you I love doing it, and having basically 4 walls of CDs and collectibles, surrounding me. Getting pushed to do it because I wasn't going to do it. Mrs. Metalhead went on Temu of all places. Yes, got all the stuff. I got this. I got my mixing board. Some other stuff. I got 2 gimbals. I didn't realize that we ordered 2. I got 2 gimbals. And yes, I'm going to start going out doing things. There's some flea markets coming to Jersey that I definitely want to go to so you guys could see the different vendors that sell things. I plan on going to a couple shops in Jersey and doing tours in there, I know a lot of people like to walk-in channels, which I don't mind. I feel most comfortable doing it here for now. And judging by the feedback, people enjoy it. So, if it means, there's a lot of people, besides Patrick and Robert, that don't really know the type of music I'm into or don't know metal, and the roots of it. Because, being an 80s kid, I still say 80s and 90s was the best years for metal, the best decades. Don't get me wrong, 2000 was okay. Like I said, but there have been, past 20 years, there have been great bands coming out still waving that metal flag, keeping it going. Yeah, that's one thing I do want to do is take you guys out to show you different places. There's shops in the city that I want to go to and live stream from there. Generation Records are in Manhattan, close to 9/11 Memorial. They're on Thompson Place. Generation Records used to be in Brooklyn, and they came to Manhattan. A lot of people thought that they wouldn't make it in Manhattan because of the location. They're down by the ports. They're making it, thriving down there. They were big in Brooklyn, but they're thriving in Manhattan, big time. There's also Rough Trade Records. I like them. My opinion, they're too small for me. I like to walk around a store. Rough Trade, it's basically you walk in, you have one area. I say like a 12 by 12 area, maybe 14 by 14. You go down a little way, you come around the corner, you have another little area, probably by like 10 by 10. And they really don't have that much displayed. They have vinyl all over the place. Not too many CDs, not too many tapes, but the tapes they do have, it's a small area, just like the CDs. And being a collector, I want to go to a place that's a good size. I could, push my elbows around and actually stand there for a little bit and go through everything, and find things that are hard to find. Didn't know. Nervous? No, not at all. Like I said, it's just like being on radio. The only difference is the camera's here and the chat's here, But I got somebody staring at me right now. If she keeps standing there, I'm gonna put the camera on her. And she thinks I won't, and I will. Mrs. Metalhead was poking her head in my room just now. Okay. But no, Din, I enjoy doing it. I really, really do. And getting the feedback from people and just seeing the questions in the chat, it keeps my brain going. It keeps me on point with a lot of things. I'm working on a couple things. I'm getting rid of a shelf that I have. I ordered a shelf. Actually, Mrs. Metalhead did. Ordered me like a 5-tier. It's like a ladder shelf. It goes up on like an angle, so I can display more stuff instead of having it, cramped together a little bit. I plan on like doing like Halloween, probably do like a Halloween theme special type stream, like say for certain bands that have songs that pertain to Halloween, like King Diamond and Merciful Fate, right here. He's still going. He's coming out with a new album. He's also bringing back Merciful Fate, which I cannot wait. It's been a while for Merciful Fate. Anybody that knows Merciful Fate, King Diamond, it's the same, well, different. King Diamond sings for Merciful Fate. King Diamond is more of a melodic storytelling. Each one of his albums is a story that leads to the next album. Merciful Fate is more of a black metal feel, darker feel, more of an anti-religion type band. A lot of people don't realize King Diamond is from Copenhagen. He now resides in Texas, I believe. I think it's Texas. I can't wait for him to come out with a new album. I love King Diamond. I've seen King Diamond 8 times. I've seen Merciful Fate like 5-6 times. So I'm chopping at the bit when they come out with albums. I love King Diamond. King Diamond is my favorite vocalist of all time. Anybody that knows King Diamond knows what I'm talking about with King. To have the vocal range that he has, it's phenomenal. But yeah, anytime you guys want to, shoot me questions about anything, I'm on Instagram. Din follows me on Instagram. I think Patrick does. My link for it is in here. I just click on the link. It'll bring you to my Instagram. Just add. It's private, but just click add, and I'll or just send me a message, and I'll add you. That's no big deal. I have my collection on there. My Instagram is basically my collection that I put up, which I'm behind putting things up. I have so many new albums and new releases that I got. I got to start doing that again. One of my favorites that just came out, Winter Song. This is part 2. It's called Time 2. This is part 2 of Time 1. 8 years in the making for this album to come out. It finally came out 5 days ago. 8 years. And this album is immensely great. Absolutely a great album. Like a dark album, mystical type, that's another band that's absolutely awesome. Yeah, treating. Yeah, I know. Well, because she made dinner. She made a nice chuck roast, I think, with all the yeah. But anyways, thanks guys for coming in. Thanks for supporting. Donations, any donations. I'm gonna put this out there. I don't look for money from anybody. You could ask Mr. Metalhead about that. My PayPal is attached to this. Any donations go right back into my channel for equipment, maybe a couple of CDs that I want. I know people were saying about showing them my Amazon wish list. I'm like, don't worry about that. I appreciate it. I really do. The thoughts. Like I said, I don't ask for things like, I just like doing it. It's fun for me. It's entertaining to do it. I think it's fun, telling people about different types of music that they're not normally that they would listen to. Like Leah, are you still here? I have to tell you something I totally forgot. I don't know if she's gone or not. Leela, if you're still here, the band Gut Rot that you put in last stream, I didn't realize there was 4 of those bands named Gut Rot. I think the one you were referring to was from California. they haven't been around since 2017, 2018, I believe. There's other bands named Gut Rot, grindcore bands, death metal bands, hardcore, black metal. Gut Rot, the one I think you were talking about, I know them. I have them on a compilation. And I think I have an EP by them somewhere in one of my boxes. I was gonna message you and I totally forgot about it. But yeah, like with Leah, when she throws out names, things click in my head. I'm like, oh, I remember them. Or like when she was asking about Viking metal. There's so many different types of metal. I gotta find a picture that's on here that I have. It gives the tree of all metal, like how it, like from where it started, how it expanded out. Because I always say metal's like a tree, a branch. It grew, it took off, it started here, and then just goes zigzags, because there's so many subgenres. There's subgenres of subgenres off of metal. I always say, if it was for Black Sabbath, there would be no metal. I still say to this day, Black Sabbath is the one who created metal 52 years ago, whatever it is now. And I will be doing a discussion on all the Sabbath albums. I have them all behind me over here somewhere. I'm gonna do that in the future. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do a discussion on all the Judas Priest albums. Yes, including the ones that Ripper did, because the two albums that Ripper did when Halford left the band, those two albums, Juggulator and Demolition, are two of the heaviest, if not the heaviest, Judas Priest albums ever made. Don't get me wrong, the albums that when Halford came back were heavy. Even the latest Judas Priest, which I think again is the album of the year for me. So I plan on talking about the albums from Metallica, the ones that I have, albums from Megadeth, Slayer. I plan on doing different things with the channel, not just back and forth things. But again, I want to thank you guys for coming in. I'm gonna go have some dinner before I get smacked. Thank you guys. I love you guys. Again, if you want to reach out to me on here or Instagram, just send me a message. Just add me on Instagram. My collection's on there. You reach me in Discord if you're there. I'm on Facebook, but I'm not on a lot. You can send me a message on there. Again, any donations, my PayPal is up. That donations go right back into the channel for equipment, for anything that deals with the channel. But again, thank you guys. I love you guys. Be safe. Have a good Monday. I will probably be on tomorrow. I'm working on a couple of things. Like I said, I want to just talks about different discographies, the bands. Guys, be safe. Take care of yourselves. Stay hard, stay metal, stay brutal. And like I say, if you're going to do something, make it count. Metalhead says thank you. Bulldog says I am out. Later.